So what if I told you that one of the greatest novels ever written had a secret older brother? You know, a rough, kind of flawed, but absolutely brilliant first draft that holds all the keys to the classic we know and love. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. This is A Happy Death, the novel that the great Albert Camus wrote and then buried, hoping you'd never, ever read it. Right from the jump, the story hits you with a gunshot. And I mean, there's no hesitation, no passion. It's just this cold, deliberate act. A man walks into a villa, he confronts his disabled victim, and then, in the quiet of a spring morning, he just pulls the trigger. And here's where it gets really wild. This is the central, shocking paradox of the whole book. See, the protagonist, a guy named Patrice Mersault, he doesn't kill out of rage or, indifference. No, he kills for a very specific philosophical reason. To buy himself the time and money he's convinced are essential for happiness. So the huge question the book asks is, can murder actually be a shortcut to a meaningful life? Crazy, right? Yeah, that radical idea is the beating heart of A Happy Death. Camus wrote it between 1936 and 1938, but then he just shelved it, moved on. It wasn't until 1971, more than a decade after he died, that it was finally published. And when it came out, it gave us this absolutely fascinating peek into the mind of a genius at work. Okay, so you might be wondering, why is this abandoned novel so important? Well, because if you've ever read Camus' most famous book, The Stranger, you are about to have a major case of déjà vu. A Happy Death is, for all intents and purposes, its prototype. It's the blueprint. Let's just put the two main characters side by side. On the left, you've got Patrice Mersault from Happy Death. This guy has a plan. He's a killer with a whole philosophy behind it. Then on the right, you have the famous Mersault from The Stranger, a man who seems to act on impulse, totally detached, totally alienated. You can literally see the evolution here, can't you? One is the thinking, talking blueprint for the other's silent, mysterious final version. And this connection? It runs deep. I mean, the very structure of the two novels is almost identical. Look at this. Both are split into two parts. Part 1 in both books gives us scenes from a monotonous life, a weird conversation with a neighbor, and then it all ends with a murder. And Part 2, it follows the consequences, with each protagonist finding his own strange version of a happy death. It's like the exact same skeleton, just dressed up in totally different clothes. So, this whole idea that killing for money can lead to happiness, where did our guy Mersault even get that from? Well, here's the twist. He didn't just cook it up himself. He learned it from the very man he was about to kill. This is the philosophy of Roland Zagreus, who is Mersault's wealthy, disabled victim. And Zagreus basically argues that being happy isn't some big spiritual quest. Nope, it's a practical problem. And to solve it, you need the single most valuable resource there is: time. Just lots and lots of time. Time to live, to experience things, to figure out who you are. And then comes the kicker. Zagreus makes this really direct, totally unsentimental link between money and time. He says if you spend your whole life working for a paycheck, you're literally trading away your time. But if you have money, you can buy that time back. And with it, you buy the chance to be happy. It's this amazing flip of that old saying. You know, we've all heard time is money, right? In Turkish, it's vakit nakittir. But Zagreus' radical argument is the complete opposite. Nakir vakittir. Cash is time. For him, wealth isn't about fancy cars or big houses. It's about freedom. Freedom from the clock. And for our protagonist Mersault, this isn't just some clever phrase. It becomes his justification for murder. But this novel wasn't just some philosophical game for Camus. Oh no, it was deeply, deeply personal. He basically poured his own life, his travels, his struggles, his experiences right onto the page. You can see here he worked on it for a couple of years, weaving his own trips and thoughts right into the story. But then by 1939, he was just done with it. He moved on. The book literally sat in a drawer, like a secret history of his most famous ideas, totally unseen until long after his death. And the connections to his own life are just so specific. I mean, we're talking about his poor childhood neighborhood, his actual job at a shipping company, his travels through Europe, his time in a sanatorium for his health, even his stormy love life and a specific house he lived in. It is all in this book. A Happy Death almost reads like a personal journal or a travelogue of Albert Camus' soul in the late 1930s. Okay, so this raises the big question, right?
If this book was so personal and had all the seeds of his greatest work, why on earth did he bury it? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. As a novel, it just didn't work.
And you don't have to take my word for it. This quote from the book's own foreword sums it up perfectly. Badly constructed, but at the same time remarkably written. And that's the whole story, right there. You have these moments of pure, breathtaking brilliance in the writing, but the structure holding it all together, it's just weak. It seems like Camus just couldn't quite stitch it all together. The whole philosophical murder plot feels totally separate from the travel sections that were based on his life. The tone is all over the map. Honestly, it feels like he was trying to cram way too much of his own raw life experience into a fictional story, and the whole thing just cracked under the pressure. So, in short, the best parts of the novel are the parts that don't really feel like a novel at all. It works as a collection of these amazing essays and lyrical thoughts and vivid memories. But as one single cohesive story, it kind of fails. And Camus, being the perfectionist he had to have known this. But, and this is a huge but, to just call it a failure is to completely miss the point. This book's real value isn't as a standalone novel. It's as the essential, indispensable origin story for one of the biggest icons of 20th century literature. The foreword to the novel actually describes it perfectly with this idea of a matrix. Now, think of it like a chrysalis, right? It's not the final, beautiful butterfly, but it's that crucial, protective shell where all the incredible transformation happens. That's what A Happy Death was. It was the chrysalis for the stranger. This was his creative lab. First, he just experimented with all these huge themes: happiness, murder, alienation, in A Happy Death. Then he refined everything. He stripped away all the obvious philosophical speeches and all the extra autobiographical stuff. He distilled it, keeping that core two-part structure: a boring life, a sudden crime, and then the fallout. And the result of all that work? The lean, ambiguous, and unbelievably powerful narrative of the stranger. He had to write the flawed novel first to discover the perfect one hiding inside it.
And that's why the two protagonists are forever linked. Mersault from The Stranger is really just Mersault from A Happy Death, but with his philosophical lectures edited out, his motives made mysterious, and his story perfected. He is, just as the critic Roger Quilio says, the little brother.
Which, it leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. We all cherish masterpieces for their perfection, for their polish. But maybe, just maybe, it's the flawed draft, the abandoned experiment that actually reveals more. It gives us the clearest window into the artist's mind, showing us not just the amazing destination, but the entire messy, complicated, and brilliant journey it took to get there.